Hey guys, yeah, I'm dressed like this. What a surprise, huh? We're still in the guitar shed and there are still guitars around, guys. And if you listen to these episodes, you'll get to see good guitars. I can guarantee you that. Look at this one. This looks like a 50s model ES 175. It's called the Texas Junk Pile. And if you look in this picture back here, you see this guitar with Tam and I on Richie Vanderwick's Dodge pickup from the mid-40s in Ventura, California, cultural capital of the world. Okay, let's put the guitars away. Let's not play guitars tonight, and let's do something productive. So I told you that I started this YouTube channel called CdLS Dads because when I started the Instagram CdLS Dads, it decided halfway through that the live episodes that I was doing, you couldn't do those until I had 1,000 followers. So this channel is not about guitars. I'm not selling a book, anything like that. And so this is the best way for me to do a series of episodes with a framework or a topic. I did an introductory episode. There's a link to it right up there right about now. And if you were to share this with people, you can send a link to the playlist and give them that shortcut, and then they go through it. I'm going to make the titles descriptive so you know what we're talking about. Tonight's title, as I told you I was going to make, was, Are You Fighting for Nothing? Are you fighting for nothing? Now, there's a couple of subject areas we could talk about that. One of them would be the medical situation. Another might be education. So that's what we're going to copy or talk about this evening. I got to remember I'm not live. We're just recording this. So I don't like to do edits. I just like to free flow. So again, I'm on a school board. I go to regional school board associations. There's our little district here. There's bigger ones close by. There's 10 different districts that come together to make up our SELPA, S-E-L-P-A, Special Education Local Plan Area. And what that is, it's kind of an oversight advisory agency that the funding for the state and federal special education funds go to, and then it's dispersed to the member districts of that SELPA. So in our area there's 10, some districts are big, some small, and usually what happens is that grouping tends to be a convenient way to group these districts for other things. So this meeting I went to was the Antelope Valley School Boards Association. They had the legislative update, so they had people from the state, California School Boards Association, attorneys in there talking about some of the legislation that's coming in that would affect local school districts, and sometimes the state of California, what they're handing down, and what the feds are handing down when somebody files a case in, say, Maryland, and it goes to the Supreme Court. Suddenly what somebody does in Maryland can affect everybody elsewhere. And we know that politics can be very volatile right now. The federal government sometimes is not in line with what the state wants to do, and sometimes all that squabbling. To the topic, are you fighting for what? What are you fighting for? Because sometimes we forget the kids are involved. So tonight I'm going to talk about I'm gonna put a riddle on you. Sometimes they say I'm Socratic. In other words, I try to have people figure it out for themselves, or I'll put enough on the table where you can feel like, okay, what he said to me just now is complete nonsense, or I can relate to it, or whatever, because none of us are going to get to the same place on the exact same topic. So again, we're here to talk about my experiences of 18 and a half years as a father of a CdLS child that was in the a mild to moderate range of special education eligibilities. If we want to talk about that, I can get into that as much as you want, but I'm going to try to keep this at the 30,000 foot level. So here's my riddle for you. We all say when we get old, like, I wish I would know now. I wish I would have known then what I know now, or if I could pick out that one place where if I would have went towards Gillette, Wyoming, instead of going south at that junction outside of Sheridan, Montana, my life would have been completely different and I wouldn't be here now. We can all do that all day long. But what if I told you that you were going to experience something that you didn't see coming, that there wouldn't be a lot of information for you to deal with, and it would be very difficult for you emotionally, it was going to be difficult for you financially, it was going to have a great impact on every part of your life, and at any time during a journey that might last a decade, 2 decades, you would always be wondering, what am I doing? What am I going to do next? But I told you at the very end of it, you would be expected to come up with one sentence that summarized what you did the entire period. I can do that for you through my experience. That doesn't mean it's going to be your experience. But I think I can help you with some of the things that have happened along the way. And we'll do that at the end. So we all know from the introductory episode, this here was Tammy. She passed away in November of 2024 after what was a fairly brief, there was some gastrointestinal issues. She had a lot of different therapies along the way, starting when she was diagnosed at 18 months. We didn't know what it was. We knew in the pregnancy early on when the perinatologist had us do some genetic counseling, and we were told several times there's some indicators here that tell us something is wrong. There's something abnormal, but it's not within the known range of abnormalities, and there were some conversations about that we had probably every reason to terminate a pregnancy. So I've been at this for, well, Tam passed at 18 and a half months, almost to the day, and I was dealing with that at 6 months into the pregnancy. So we're going to call this about 19 years of experience, during which there were therapies, there were medical challenges, and now we're going to talk about education a little bit here. So I want you to think about 20 years ago, and I want you to think about Google and the internet, and I want you to think about, you know, how easy it is. Like, say, for example, you have a weed eater and you don't know how to change the string on a certain model. You can just get on YouTube and say, Kawasaki, this model, whatever, change weed eater head string, and it will give you a series of instructions. There's medical programs, WebMD, I kind of feel like this is doing this. And so the ability to access information that kind of gives you some basic guidelines that's pretty accurate has gone up a lot in the last 20 years. Now, I have other children that were born at 27 and a half weeks, twins. The neonatal experience at that time was horrific. You really didn't know what was going to happen. And fast forward, 20 years later, when Tam was born, you have a lot more information, but certainly not what we have now. And you'll find that the parents on the CdLS sites now are talking about what is the specific genetic identification of the type of CdLS. We didn't have that. We had a very good geneticist at Cedars named John Graham take out a loop, a jeweler's magnifying glass, and look at some things, and basically said, yeah, this is what it is. And that was our diagnosis, and we didn't go through and find out, what it was. But we did find out at 18 months old that it was Cornelia de Lange Syndrome. As I said in my first episode, they brought in, when the doctor came back and was going to break the news to us, there were other people there, and it was clear that they had training in human emotions, mental health, psychology, maybe even psychiatry, because when you get this news, imagine you're the person that says, this child, it has something very rare, and there's not a lot known about it, and that hits you. I want to start by telling you that whatever you're feeling now or when you get the diagnosis, that's normal for you. Yeah, I use this pointer a lot because it comes in handy pointing out different things and whatever, so get used to it. We call it chick-fil-A teal pointer. No offense intended. But whatever you are feeling, that's normal. If you look at it as anything other than normal, you'll never get the opportunity to quit bearing it and just face it and go, okay, what do I do with this? Well, the first thing you're going to do with a CdLS diagnosis is try to find out, what does this mean? And it's kind of, for lack of a better word, and I don't mean to be rude or insensitive, but it's kind of like you're going to buy a car or a tool for your shop, and you don't know what this is, you don't know what the tolerances are, you don't know how to set it up, you don't know how to operate, so you got an owner's manual. Well, guess what? The owner's manual for a CdLS 20 years ago, 40 years ago, was not good. The CdLS Foundation has done a really good job, and they were always there since Tammy was born, talking about, for lack of a better word, let's use guitars as an example. If I say this guitar here has a specification of, it has a certain headstock, it has certain tuners, it has a scale length, it has a pickup, it has this type of configuration, it has all these kinds of things. These are kind of the things that you would find comparable to when you go to the pediatrician. My child was born at this weight, the body mass index is this, they're growing, they're putting on this weight. Some blood work will tell you that they're getting the right level of nutrients, there's no health problems, all that kind of thing. When you have a CdLS child, throw those normal charts out the window, and everything starts to act like, well, this could be improved. We're in the 2 percentile, meaning that 98% of the other kids are better in size, health, whatever that might be, whatever those parameters might be. So it becomes really easy to worry, and it becomes really easy to look at your child like, oh, I need to figure out how to fix this. Well, let's do this. I want to be a German Shepherd. I really want to be a German Shepherd. So I need you to do everything you can, educationally, medically, lifestyle, diet, whatever. You need to make me into a German Shepherd. It's not working yet. Keep trying harder. Y'all get together and make this. This sounds ridiculous, but think about it. Your child was born with CdLS. The first thing you can do is jump into the data and find out the basic parameters. What's really important? What is really important? Is your child able to eat? Is your child able to, I've got a message coming in from Kendra's sister. We were talking about a law case that's coming down, and she's, off at law school. She's getting close to being an attorney, so she's sending me the synopsis of what they were talking about, the meeting over there. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about law here too. So, is the child in duress? Is the child stable? Is the child sleeping? Is the child eating? Does the child seem to be happy? Those are the first things. Never forget that. You cannot beat yourself up just because something happened or you have this diagnosis. I mean, should my parents feel bad that I wasn't born a German Shepherd? Should they put themselves through a life of guilt? Should they feel as if they lost a normal puppy and got this? I've never talked to them about this. They already think I'm crazy enough. But think about the position you are in, and you all know what I'm talking about, you CdLS parents. It's almost like this finality of something that you know everything is a problem. You can't predict, and the way things are put to you through the normal community is something is wrong. You are this far off the median of normal. Okay? Think about that for a minute. So if you're experiencing this now or have experienced it, ask yourself, have I gone to the source? I don't go to a tractor dealer to get my jet aircraft fixed, right? Okay. So never underestimate the CdLS Foundation and the resources it has. The United States Foundation has so much information, but try to figure out and work with your pediatric doctor to find out what is this and what do I really, really need to look out for. I'm not going to go into the details of what Tam had because it will just start everybody look. What I have noticed is every time you go to a new doctor, and you tell them Cornelia de Lange Syndrome, so they'll write it down. They may disappear right there. They are in their medical Google, whatever that is, and they're typing it in. And it never fails early on while they're learning the child. They will come back or they'll call you the next day and go, hey, I just discovered something. And they think that they have hit the jackpot on, they have figured something out. And they're, most of the time, they're in the ballpark. But until they get experience with a CdLS child and they know what to do, and their life experience or professional experience lets them be able to do that, there is going to be a lot of misunderstandings. And it's really hard to have confidence when your doctor doesn't know the things that you think they should know and you're kind of still struggling with your emotions. But get to the CdLS site and encourage your medical people to have a look at it. A geneticist in the background is worth a lot more as you go along than when they made the diagnosis. Always remember that, because they can kind of tell you there's some signs that go with it. There's some malformations. There's things about finger placement. There's things about how things didn't form right. There's all those kinds of things. And that can be really valuable in helping other doctors kind of chart a plan, because that's really what you're trying to do. Identify the threats, deal and prioritize with them, and then try to normalize the other stuff. So you got that going on medically. Now let's talk about educationally. What is going on? Okay, 9 times out of 10, your child has some level of therapy, and those therapies are provided usually by a county office of health. So in California, it's called a regional center. So there are some things that are eligible to make your child a regional center client almost right away. Multiple births, certain genetic things, and they are there to kind of say, we're here to get you some early intervention and some therapies. So you might get speech, language pathology, you might get physical therapy, occupational therapy, and what that model looks like is you are virtually putting the kid in the car, transporting them to the therapist at certain days of the week, certain prescribed times. You walk the child in, you have face-to-face with the therapist. Don't go in and distract your child. Take a break, read a book, get some of that downtime, because face it, typically the mothers are not good at that. They find it easier just to do it, handle it, and follow the system rather than let somebody else come in and kind of complicate it. They may see it as more than it needs to be. They may get nervous when somebody else is doing it. Try to control what it is you're thinking and not so much others. So we're starting to get into that topic now. Are you fighting for nothing? So anyway, at the end of the therapy session, the therapist brings your child out and tells you how it went and may suggest something that you could do at home. Remember, you are overwhelmed at home. Never feel like you are failing your child if you don't do every little exercise that the good intention therapist is making a suggestion. Now you're on, remember, 1 in 10,000, 1 in 50,000 live births. A lot of doctors, a lot of therapists have never seen this before. Your therapist, this might be their first time. Now when they're doing it 5 and 10 years, Tammy had therapists that were with her a decade or more. And so those people have a ton of information from their experience with Tammy, but most people don't have that. Give those people some grace. Also, when you're reading stuff on the Cornelia de Lange site, watch it very carefully. If someone is saying, hey, this happens because this number of kids have this, and this is different, so therefore because of this, this, and this is always the case. If that finding is based on data that isn't representative of a larger community, maybe it's based on people attending a conference, the people that can afford to go there to see the teams in the clinic, maybe they get a scholarship. There's a lot of kids out there who don't have that. When they're excluded from the data, the base data might be faulty when it comes to putting those concrete findings out there that people depend on. So watch out for that. Use your own common sense. Anyway, you are the taxi. You are you're the advocate for the child. You're delivering them to the therapist. You're taking the information. You're taking it home, incorporating the home environment. Then they hit 3 years old and the world changes. Okay, then here comes the third birthday. So a few months before that, we're talking about a transitional plan from the county office where everything is kind of a medical thing. It's got a medical thing. I'm seeing some autistic-like behavior. I'm seeing delays in speech. I'm seeing motor skill, fine motor skill problems. One of the first things you might notice in the transition from the pre-3-year-old regional center, whatever it is in your state, is you'll see physical therapy becomes adapted physical education. So here's something a lot of people don't know. The stuff that's happening, the early interventions, the medical-based stuff, is medical-based. What somebody forgot to consider when they take the kids from a county office of education, a regional center, something like that, and you hand off to the public school, the public school's focus is this. Does this issue hamper the child's access to curriculum, learning? So, I've seen parents argue, well, my child has a diagnosis of autism. Who wants to put a label, a lifelong label of autism on a child at 3 years old and chase that down the road? The school is not going to do that, I guarantee you, because there are some developmental things. Some kids talk before others. Some kids develop physically before others, some early, some late, all that kind of thing. But you want to remember, if you're taking a medical diagnosis and trying to found an educational program, it's not going to work. They won't recognize it. So there's a lot of problems in the handoff between the county 3-year-old and before level and when it gets handed off to the public schools. Because here's what special day class, 3-year-old special day class looks like. They have therapists there. There's some element of education, kind of like preschool. So you might have a child that has mild speech language pathology needs. You might have someone that has physical things, medical issues, and all those kinds of things. And they're brought into this classroom. And I don't want to say it's a holding tank or a waiting room, but you're there for a continuation of your early intervention therapies. You are not there for a private preschool. And the worst thing that can happen for a child that has mild to moderate needs is you get this parent that comes in, wants to go ride their horse and get a break. They dump their kid off at the school. Of course, they get their therapy, but that same parent is pushing for a higher end educational focus like you might see in kindergarten. Okay? So, understand what a special day class for 3-year-olds is about. Is this where my child gets therapy? Now, some parents choose to arrange the schedule, and if you have a couple of therapies during a certain school day, you might decide, okay, well, I'm going to bring the child in 15 minutes before therapy, and then once the therapy is over, we're going to leave and we're not going to participate in the special day class. For example, Tammy was not mobile. She was crawling around on the floor, and she had some issues about focusing and this type of thing. So other kids walking around the classroom, she wasn't able to participate in the educational aspects of it. And suddenly it became like the focus was not stepping on Tammy. And some people tried some things that, out of frustration, I think they probably shouldn't have tried, and not best practices. We won't get into all that. But it became very clear that Tammy was the outlier. Number one, you don't know what to do with a child that's so far behind the norm, even in a special day class. You have staff, even therapists, that don't know what Cornelia de Lange is. They don't know any of the special approaches. They're learning them as they go. Remember, if you're in a town of 250,000 people, you might have 20 in the whole town, and some of them may not have been diagnosed, identified, and some of them may not be in school. Kind of an underlying message, I'll break it to you here. When you start getting really frustrated trying to manage this is sometimes where you check out on the school systems. And if that's happening, you've got to ask yourself, is there a social and community trade out? So I want you to think about that when they're young. Because when you're in a gym and you've got the whole town there, and it's very clear that the other kids knew your child who's now gone, you start wondering if all the challenges you faced in trying to navigate this and your kid being the odd one out, if you don't want to ask yourself later, should I have let the child be part of the social aspect of the community? Because I don't know how much Tammy benefited from others, but I know this community benefited from her a great deal. It taught tolerance, it taught acceptance. You know, we hear the word diversity a lot now. I guess I'm just supposed to want to be whatever I want, and then I just dump that on you. And if you're not receptive to me invading your life with whatever my rhetoric is, then you're a bad person. That's not diversity. Diversity is someone looking at someone else and saying, hey, I wonder how I can help that person, or is my experience with that person helping me? Anyway, let's get back on topic. You can tell that what's going on here is it becomes very easy to get frustrated. You go to the doctor and you're saying, listen, the caloric intake is high, but you're telling me that I'm not feeding the child. We heard that a lot. How many of you have heard that? Your child isn't growing. Would you just feed the baby? Now, how can you have confidence in someone that says that? Well, that's like expecting a 16-year-old that just walked out of DMV with their driver's license to drive in LA traffic in the afternoon like a 20-year veteran of commuting at bumper to bumper and high speed or whatever. Sometimes you got to ask yourself, how do I prioritize what's really important so I can feel safe as a parent? Is the child eating? Are they under duress? Do they seem to be, are their vital signs okay? Do they seem to be in pain? Do I get those big ones out of the way? Get those out of the way. And I think most doctors can tell with the most rudimentary gadget that could be happening. When you start getting angry with people and you start taking over the research and saying, well, I read this, my child's never going to talk because they have 3 fingers on this hand and 5 on this one, and this one is shaped like this, and you start getting into this hoodoo voodoo stuff where people are just talking, you start taking it as the gospel, and then you feel like it's your job to walk in and be the Encyclopedia Britannica of what they don't know about your child, and they should know. Because I've seen people say, it's not my problem that the district doesn't have money. It's federal law says that IDEA says that you have to do this. Your implementation of this child's needs is your problem. Do it, or I'm going to lawyer up. And then those people tend to go out in the parking lot and talk to other people, and they're saying we got the parking lot union of disgruntled parents. Think about that. Think about if everything you did was the best you could do. Say you're a teacher, you just got out of college. You decided, I'm going to go help special education kids because somebody in my family, or I had a speech problem, or my grandpa had a rough time and in his last years, or whatever it is. You take a person with motives of purity, and then you go in, you stomp all over them, you're rude, you're abrasive, and you're just angry. Got to ask yourself, what are you angry about? That they're not born with this knowledge of what CdLS is? Are you angry because they haven't went and found kids with CdLS so they can get the experience it takes to deal with your kid? Are you angry because they don't know how to deal with your anger? Okay, let's stop there for a minute and let's kind of break this down and look at some assumptions I think are relatively reasonable. Let's try that. So let's talk a little bit about educational law, special education law. Now, the districts have to provide what they call the floor of special education, not the ceiling, not the outer limits, the basic building blocks, the floor. There's a great case. Amy Rowley had some issues, nonverbal, hearing issues, and it got so bad between the parents and the district, they would give her someone that she was trying to read their lips, and they hired somebody with a beard. And at the end of it, there were legal battles, and at one point the district sued when they got a ruling that said Amy's parents were errant or at fault or incorrect. The district actually went after the family home in order to recoup what the legal costs had been to the district. I did a series of editorials. If you want to see the worst of the worst, Darien, Connecticut, the people there brought in a new special education director who decided that there are regional norms. In other words, in this regional area, there are 2.3 some persons with this out of every 100. So once we hit that level in our classrooms and in our student body, we'll quit looking for it. We'll stop identifying. And you hear about encroachments on special education funding and whatever. And there's almost this attitude on the surface that why are we sticking money into the kids that have the least amount of promise at the end of the game? I said this 100 times if I said it once. You cannot be on the school board and advocate for your child Specifically, you cannot get your friend's child out of trouble because you have the power. It's not about that. If it's not about that for you, there's no place for you on the school board. But all of these things turn into contention, and you feel like, I have to make sure that somebody doesn't drop the ball, because if they do, my child is not going to turn out okay in the end, and I will have failed in advocating for my parents or for my child. So I've failed as a parent. That kind of anger alienates people. So how do you get there? Well, what is the difference between being involved and being pushy? And when you're pushy, are you easy to deal with? No. It's almost like it can get to a point where every question that's asked is a trick question. Well, what did you notice about this? Did you do this? When was this? And then you're turning around and whipping that information back. And I thought you told me on Tuesday that, think about this. There's a lot of classrooms in this country that are flooded with kids. The teacher, a good teacher, can look at a child and know this one's doing okay. This one's way ahead of it. They're bored. These people over here are really struggling. And this kid with the IEP, Tammy, I don't know what to do. And they're processing all that. They're trying to move everybody along. And of course, we need the good scores so the realtors can sell great houses for great prices in our neighborhood. Yeah, that can be the focus. And you're left over here feeling like no one's paying attention to my child. And I am just surrounded by people who are dropping the ball. Now, in special education, there are rules. There are state rules, there are federal rules, and there's county office of education rules. So there's a minimum amount of structure that goes into special education. And if someone says, my child isn't getting the services they need, or do they have an IEP, individual education plan, or whatever they call it, where you're at? Are there goals? Are there assessments? Is somebody saying, hey, they're doing this, speech, we're looking for this, APE, we're looking for this? There is a program there, so we can't act like there's not a program. And because we sometimes forget that it's about access to curriculum, it's about access to learning. It's not about correcting a medical situation. You always have to remember that. So, if you are starting to get where every time you ask someone a question, there's an end result that you're looking for, so you can do a data dump and tell somebody, you're not doing your job, the law says this, you don't know anything about my child. You got to think about the relationships that you're alienating. So does the pressure work when you're walking in and pressuring everybody? Let's look at it this way. Again, I've told you there's a structure within the law, and it's not set at your expectation, but it's set at what's reasonable, so the attorneys that work for the district are able to say, yeah, this is reasonable. So you'll hear these people, I'm going to file a state complaint with the California Department of Education. So what does that look like? Well, there are certain requirements, like you do therapy. So if someone says, I'm going to do therapy, and I'm going to do X amount of therapy at X frequency for X number of minutes every so often or whatever, that's all added up, and it says that in this amount of time, and reading this stuff is kind of like out of four of five attempts with minimal prompting using the AAC device or whatever, the child will do this, this, and this, and these are goals. And then at the end of the year, they go back or they do progress reports at, every quarter, every midway through the year, they'll update those goals. Sometimes kids are achieving the goals, surpassing the goals. So there's a lot of stuff going on where somebody's actually looking at this and going, again, is the kid getting in second grade the best exposure that they can get with their capacity for the curriculum that they're supposed to learn? The teacher is not going to solve a medical problem. Understand that. Don't let those lines get blurred. When you go in there and you say, hey, I'm filing a state complaint, you're not following the IEP. Well, the state will take your complaint. They're going to want to know, what did you do? What is your perception? What is your case? What is the problem? What did you do to communicate that to the school? What did the school do? You don't just throw somebody under the bus and go, I think they're not doing this, and you just turn it in. That will go nowhere. When the state starts coming in, calling the teacher, calling the principal, they start looking at this, okay, this is a litigious issue. The parent, because somebody was sick with one day and missed therapy, this parent will file a state complaint. You don't be that person. Also, don't be the kind of person that can't say, hey, I think I'm misinformed. I think that I don't really know what's going on. I understand the difficulty of the rareness of this. I understand that nobody's got a lot of experience with this, and I just worry for my child. And sometimes I think I'm dealing with broken dreams before they even start, and I'm sorry if I am coming off as aggressive or causing your job to be harder because of the way I'm acting. What is it that I can do that would make your job easier and less stressful? And listen to what they have to say. That is how relationships are built. If you don't have that, the next thing you become known as the parent from hell, and daddy's on the school board now, and you better not mess with that kid. You better give that kid everything that they want. Well, in what world does daddy coming in on the school board knowing nothing about education? School board members are there. You'll find that whenever taxes are involved, there's got to be some oversight so everybody on the inside just doesn't give all the money to the superintendent and nothing happens for the kids. It's basically a fail-safe. It doesn't mean that I'm an expert on education. Sometimes I have to make decisions in the back room and there's contention, and some of them are SPED cases, and I want to know, was there basic compliance? Did you do the assessment? Was the therapist showing up reasonably? Are the sessions being met? Are the IEPs being held on time? If there's going to be a change in services or prior written notices sent out. When I got a lawyer in the background telling me, you need to settle this case because the district made a mistake here, here, and here, I start looking, what did that do to get this kid better access to the curriculum? Now, when you start alienating people at school, teachers, other parents, the next thing you know, you're that outlier. And when you're the outlier, you have made it very difficult for your child to become socially accepted. Do the other kids invite you to the party? Do they encourage you to swing on the swing? Do they want to know your sign language? Those are all indicators that there's a positive inclusion into the community. I'll tell you what, if you don't have those things, the day comes where school will be over and your war with everyone will be over. They will watch you walk out the door and they will worry for your child, because now the only person that your child has is you. And they're not there to help your child socialize. They're not there to make your child's day interesting. Think about that. So I was just saying, death of dreams creates fictitious adversarial relationships. So who's the enemy? It's them. It's the district. It's the education system. It's this nameless, faceless monster that exists out there. Because why? because somebody doesn't understand that we're hurting inside. Someone doesn't understand that we feel frustrated, that we can't fix it. Somebody didn't call us back right away. We have a very urgent situation because our child has this or this. You don't understand this. Your child is fine. Or we subject ourselves to some of these sites where if this is you and you need this, that's great. But I don't like to go participate where it's a contest of, I'm concerned because my child is exhibiting this. They walk on their toes. Well, some Cornelia de Lange kids walk on their toes, and some orthopedic surgeon might say, well, sometimes there's a malformation. We do some work with the tendons and ligaments and do some casting. Don't chase that down, but that does exist. Or I can't spend some time with a geneticist and say, hey, you see the outcomes, you know the outcomes, you know the inherent problems. I can see the malformations out here. Is there anything in here I need to know about? What if I told you that you took your kid to a hospital because they had all the records there, and then after they were gone, someone said one of the best geneticists for Cornelia de Lange is at that hospital, and I'd go, oh my gosh, no one was talking to each other. All kinds of things going on. But again, these sites sometimes, well, you think that's bad. My child is, this. It happens. It's human nature. Guitar sites. I might post a picture of this and say, hey, I had a spot right here that was delaminating, meaning this part of the wood was coming off. What should I do? Well, other people will post a picture of, oh, this is my guitar. Okay, what does that have to do with me asking for help with someone else? Or, my child has a vocabulary of 400 signs, but the school won't recognize any of them. They tell me that even the sign language community would ostracize my child because they have poor fine motor skills, blah, blah, blah. Spewing hate speak and taking over the site because, hey, I have it worse than you, and my misery is up here in comparison to everything else. Or we call a doctor, we get somebody on the phone and say, hey, help me understand this. And we go on with this myriad, this thick of who didn't do what, who's the enemy, who's the bad guy. Yeah. Avoid that. Remember, keep it simple. Is the stuff that's putting your child in life-threatening duress, is that your focus? Look at the Cornelia de Lange site. Ask yourself, what is an indicator that I have forward movement on any measurable thing? What does that look like tomorrow? What does it look like next week? And what does it look like on the first day of next month? And what can I do to make that a reality? Because face it, I'm not going to say that your Cornelia de Lange child or any other special needs child is not capable of going to college or working at a place or whatever. I'm not saying that. Let's not cut hairs. But ask yourself, is it likely, given the assessment that says that Tammy was between 4 and 7 months old cognitively when she was 5 years old? How do I fix that? By being angry, yelling at someone? Or can I do something to advocate that my child is really not able to show you their potential because they're trying to communicate to you in a way that I see at home that you might not be able to see? Let's schedule a meeting. Let's take a minute and try and figure out if there's something we can do here where you can see what I can see, and let's figure out how to make this work as a team. So, let's get back to the original question. You have a Cornelia de Lange child, or you know someone that has one, or you have another issue. That's why you're watching me. I'm talking to dads now. And moms, when you hear me say stuff, don't paint me out as the only sensitive male in the whole United States that gets it. I'm just a blue-collar guy that has the right people take me under their wing, and I'm very fortunate in my career. I'm very fortunate for who I work for. I'm fortunate for the city I work for. I'm fortunate that the people around here that were goofy enough to vote for me to represent their kids, all of their kids, in the community, on the school board. It's very humbling. And it's humbling to be able to sit here and tell you with the hope that I can talk about some of the things I thought, some of the things I've seen, and tell you, keep yourself in the right frame of mind. Whatever you're feeling is okay, but don't make it at the diminishment of others. So, let me tell you this. I knew pretty early that Tammy would probably be the least functional kid in her class all the way through. I thought it was important to have career technical opportunities, life skills. Tammy was capable of walking around 2 guitar shops and doing simple tasks. She could, this ring right here was made out of a fretboard that she used to practice filing on when we would pull the frets out to replace these things here. So she had a vocation. Now that vocation, her skill set might not have been that good, but I like to hear this thing. It reminds me that she was there when she's still here. But there are vocations and things. And Tammy could go into Fred's shop. She could go into Guitar 48. She liked to go there on Friday night at Guitar 48. They treated her like a princess. They would get a guitar off the wall. They would set her up. That's what the movies you're seeing are in the guitar shop. They were part of her community. They're good people. The day will come where somebody out of this world, and I'm not going to go Jesus on you, whatever. If you want to go down some other path, that's good, that's on you. But there will come a time when Tammy will be fully perfect, and she will say to somebody, that's Rob, that's Fred. Fred has his own issues. He's talking like this, his throat was burned. It's terrible, terrible circumstances in his life. Those people had time for Tam where she had enough confidence to walk in, sit down, and do a little job. So she had a vocation. And so I'm looking at this as her dad, and I thought, when I put that guitar out there and gave her the opportunity to let her, not me, her, I didn't have to bully these people. I gave her the guitar. I built the guitar. She took the guitar. And she made a statement to the world, look at me, I'm a person, I can do something interesting, and I want you to notice me. So, 20 years later, I have to look at everything that I've done, everything I've said, the impatience, the snippy comments, the unrealistic expectations, not managing the unrealistic expectations that I had and placing them on others. And now with the experience I have, which includes seeing her name and her birth and death date on a poster, having people in the community ask me, how are you? They're not asking me, how are you? Because of me, they're asking me, how are you losing the treasure that was Tammy? That's really what's going on. So, put all that aside. if you would have asked me 20 years ago, what do you expect for this child? What's the one thing you would focus on and you would want everybody to know? Well, I know what that is now. And the funny part about it is, I really didn't have to ask the people that had the biggest impact on her life. Now that I know what it is, I never had to ask those people. They gave it to her automatically. What I wanted for Tammy was her to have her dignity. So I want you to think about that. I also want you to think about the idea that she would sign her name. She was never supposed to sign her name. She signed her name here. This is a very early signature. She wasn't very good at it. At the end of it, she was doing the, I'm going to put a heart where the I is. There is one person that is responsible for that. It was her OT. And she worked with that OT a really long time. And I remember the OT telling everybody, I need this child, since she can't talk, since most people don't know sign language, I need her to be able to write her name and phone number down. That was an impossibility at one point to me. But that person has so much experience with Tammy that they could probably go to the CdLS gathering and be an interesting person to some of the other people and give them some good practical advice. Tammy's a APE person, therapist. I see her. And these people are very humble. They don't understand when I tell them, your experience is invaluable. Nobody is able to say, I worked with a child that was this, nonverbal, this, and share that information with others who are in a position of starting out, feeling hopeless, feeling like they've lost, they're mourning the death of a child just because they weren't born normal. So ask yourself, when you are dealing with people, can you give them the opportunity by just tempering yourself a little bit, by being a little bit vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm not good with what I'm feeling and that's not your problem, and I so much appreciate anything you're doing, because doing this alone, I am failing miserably and I'm confusing that with anger and all those kinds of things. Every therapist that you guys touch and that you recognize for helping your child, and give them specific examples, my child can do this now. That is what builds knowledge and practical, put your hands on it, help these kids experience. If you know somebody that has worked with your child, tell your regional coordinator about it. Send them a letter, thank them, and tell them, I'm going to tell the National Foundation about you. If you know of a doctor that has a specialty, that has dealt with a couple of kids. I know a funny story about what's going on up in Canada. It's I suspect that some doctor with good bedside manner that had a certain specialty suddenly saw an influx of a bunch of kids with CdLS and started going, I've never seen this. But now all of a sudden, yeah, because the mommy's ganged up on you and said, we like you, you're a good person, and if you don't have the experience, we're going to find it for you. So there are people out there that want to help you. Remember, whatever you're feeling is normal, but if it's tearing you apart and it's making you feel guilty and inadequate, it's not coming from the right place. Trust me, the educational system has some fail-safes to keep it where there's a certain minimum criteria of what's to happen, and the focus is on, we want your child to have the access that they can get that will help them become as functional and independent as they can be. The last thing we want is to have a collection of outbursts and a history of being a mean person result in the day when you walk out the door of the school for the final day and you go home and your child goes to the room because they missed their friends, they're depressed, they're self-injurious, and there's no payday at the end of the day for all of your hard work. Don't let that happen. And I tell people, if I could give you any advice about parenting, and I've learned this by failing most of the time, your job as a parent is to help your child find their best them, not what you failed to be or what you wanted them to be, but their best them. Now, I'm going to hold it together here, but if you're me, I had Tam. I had her for 18 and a half years. It started off with me not knowing what she was, what she was going to be. She was Tam. And a day came where some things have been normalized, and yeah, that's just happened, and that goes with it. The day came where she went in the hospital, and something really scary happened on the way there. We got her back, and she didn't come home that day. And when you're left with that, you realize a lot of people out there made Tam important because they gave her her dignity. All right, guys, that's enough. Give me a like, give me a subscribe. Pass this along to somebody that's having a problem. Reassure them that they're doing the best they can do, and that sometimes they are the subject matter expert, whether you believe that or not, and be kind in your teaching method. It is guitar time. Let's close this out by having a look at a little clip that Cody Harrell down in Sardis, Mississippi, cultural capital of the world, made the evening he found out that Tam had passed away. And this guitar you're going to see in the video, yeah, Tam signed it and did a little bit of work on it. So, Cody, take it away. And thank you, man.